Right then. Hollywood, and London for that matter, loves selling you a story about the swinging 60s. Oh, the glamour. The music, the fashion, the Beatles, the pure, unadulterated freedom. Grand. But the real story, the one with the carry-on and the absolute state of it, that's the one they don't want you to remember. They want you to think it was all a hard day's night. The truth is, the whole rotten empire of old school filmmaking was coming crashing down, and the new crowd was so far up their own backsides they couldn't see the cliff they were dancing on. Come here to me, and I'll tell you about the film that wasn't just part of the mess, it was the mess. The most expensive, star-stuffed, arrogant piece of home movie all guff ever put to celluloid. The Magic Christian. On paper, you couldn't fault it. 1969. The old studios were on their last legs, bleeding money, trying to figure out what the kids wanted. They'd already bet the farm on historical epics and musicals and seen it all go up in smoke. So now, the new arrogance took over. The artist, the creative. The plan was simple. Take the hippest, blackest comedy novel of the decade, give it to the biggest comedy star on the planet, and throw in a Beatle for good measure. A budget big enough to choke a donkey, and a lineup of swinging London faces so long it looked like a bleeding roll call at the Last Supper. What could possibly go wrong? The novel, The Magic Christian, was written by a fella named Terry Southern. Now, Southern was no Egypt. He'd co-written Dr. Strangelove with Kubrick. He'd penned Easy Rider. He was the absolute white-hot centre of counterculture wit, and his book was a masterpiece of pure, unadulterated cynicism. It's about an eccentric billionaire, Sir Guy Grand, who decides the best use of his fortune is to prove, in increasingly bizarre and disgusting ways, that every single person, no matter how highfalutin or respectable, has their price. He spends his money making it hot for people. It's dark, it's mean, and it's hilarious in a makes you want to take a shower kind of way. It was also, by its very nature, completely unfilmable. It was just a series of episodes, pranks, and short, sharp shocks. It had no plot, it had no heart, it was just a sneer. Enter Peter Sellers. By 1969, Sellers was a god, but he was a god with notions. He wasn't just a comic genius, he was, in his own head, a profound philosopher, a mystic, a spiritual guru, and an absolute head the ball. He was coming off a string of hits, but also the legendary, monumental chaos of Casino Royale from 1967. That was a film so disastrous, so expensive, and so incoherent that it almost buried 3 studios, and Sellers was right at the heart of it. Acting de maggot from day one, firing directors, rewriting scripts, holding the entire production hostage to his whims. He was, to put it mildly, a liability, but he was a bankable liability. And he loved Southern's book. He saw himself as Sir Guy Grand, not as a character to play, mind you, but as a kindred spirit, someone who also saw the world as a rotten, greedy joke. So Sellers signed on, not just to star, but as a producer, effectively giving him total control. This yoke was meant to be his masterpiece, a perfect recipe for success.
Yes! Definitely!
Now, who do you get to direct a film starring the most famously difficult actor in the world? An actor who had just gotten his last director, Joseph McGrath, fired off Casino Royale. Why? You get Joseph McGrath, of course! Stop the lights! You couldn't make it up! The studio, Commonwealth United, was a new outfit, flush with cash and desperate to be in the hip movie business. They were the ultimate gombean men. They thought, Sellers wants McGrath, the fella he just had canned? Grand, it must be some sort of artistic thing we don't understand. They didn't get it. Sellers wasn't hiring McGrath for his genius. He was hiring a fella he knew he could roll over. A fella who wouldn't, or couldn't, say no. It was a power play from the word go. A grand start. And then, the cherry on this rapidly melting sundae, the studios, in their infinite wisdom, said, Peter Sellers is great, but the kids, they don't know him. We need a kid. We need a Beatle. The Beatles were, at this point, the biggest cultural force on the planet, and they were also in the middle of a very messy, very public divorce. Ringo Starr, lovely affable, probably just wants a quiet life. Ringo was available. He'd just walked out on the White Album sessions. He was feeling unloved and at a loose end, so they offered him a part, not just a cameo, a lead role. They invented a character for him, Youngman Grand, Sir Guy's newly adopted son, a wide-eyed innocent to follow his mad uncle around. This, right here, is where the whole thing curdles. The book's cold, sociopathic purity was gone. Now, it had to be a buddy comedy, a wacky adventure with Peter and Ringo. The sheer unadulterated egoistry of the decision is breathtaking. They'd taken a scalpel and handed it to a toddler, expecting a work of art. So, the plan was set. A genius actor with total control, a director who was already on his knees, a pop star with zero acting experience in a role that shouldn't exist. And a script that was being rewritten every single day, not just by Southern, but by Sellers, by McGrath, and, for a laugh, by a pair of young, hungry writers. Sellers knew fellas by the name of John Cleese and Graham Chapman. Yes, those fellas. The future of British comedy, hired as script doctors on a sinking ship, watching the absolute circus unfold and taking copious notes for their own future work. The budget, an already high $2.5 million, was now just a suggestion. The studio, headquartered in America, was getting reports from the swinging London set that must have read like chapters from the Book of Revelation. The arrogance wasn't just from the studio, it was from the talent. This was the new breed, the artist as king, and they were about to build a multi-million-dollar monument to their own egos. The filming. Jesus. Where do you even start? It wasn't a film shoot, it was a party that someone occasionally pointed a camera at. The script, now a patchwork of Southern's dark satire, Sellers' goon show sketches, and Cleese and Chapman's proto-Python absurdism, had no spine. It was just vignettes. Sir Guy and Youngman wander through London and the world, proving everyone is a greedy pig. Grand. So, the film is just a lineup of cameos. A who's who of 1969, all lining up to take the studio's money and be part of the happening. And every cameo cost a fortune, not just in fees but in delays, in ego massaging, in the sheer logistical carry-on of it all. You had Raquel Welch, the biggest pin-up in the world. What's she doing? Oh, she's the priestess of the whip. One of a group of slave drivers on a Roman galley. On the River Thames, rowing the toffs to dinner. She's dressed in leather, whipping a team of topless models. Why? Don't ask. It's satire, you see. It's a comment. On what? On the fact that Raquel Welch looks good in leather, I suppose. She's on screen for maybe 2 minutes. That's a week's shooting, probably. You had Christopher Lee, the great Dracula himself. What's his profound satirical role? He's a ship's vampire on the climactic cruise. He wanders around in his cloak, looking menacing, and that's it. It's a walk-on. A gag. Look, it's Dracula. Pure devilment. You had Yul Brynner, the King of Siam, the gunslinger from the Magnificent Seven, an icon of old-school Hollywood masculinity. His contribution? He appears in a drag bar, dressed as a woman, singing a torch song to Roman Polanski. I am not making this up. Roman Polanski, the hotshot director of Rosemary's Baby, plays a drunken punter who gets serenaded by Yul Brynner in a wig. The layers of what the hell on this are staggering. The studio is paying for this. They're writing checks for Peter Sellers to film Yul Brynner in drag, hitting on Roman Polanski. And they're terrified to say no, because this is art, this is the swinging 60s, and if they complain they'll look like the man. The whole production was like this. A parade of famous faces. John Cleese as a customs agent, Graham Chapman as an Oxford rower, Spike Milligan as a traffic warden, Richard Attenborough as a snotty Oxford don, all of them drafted in for a day or two, handed a few pages of nonsense, and paid a fortune. The film wasn't being directed, it was being curated by Sellers. McGrath, the supposed director, was just trying to keep the camera in focus, while Sellers, his producer, was away wit to fairies, indulging his every whim. Ringo, bless him, just looks baffled. He's the only one who looks like a real person. He wanders through the entire film with a look of gentle, sad confusion, like a man who's been told he's at a party but suspects he's actually in an asylum. He's the audience, trapped in the film with the lunatics. And Sellers. Oh, Sellers was acting the maggot from day one. He'd show up late, he'd refuse to come out of his trailer, he'd decide, on a whim, that a scene wasn't truthful enough. He'd get into arguments with Terry Southern, the man who wrote the book, telling him he didn't understand the book. He was Sir Guy Grand, a man so rich and powerful he could bend reality to his will. The problem was, Sellers was Sir Guy Grand, and the studio was his plaything. He was spending their money on his own massive, elaborate prank. The film wasn't a story about Sir Guy Grand, it was a documentary of Peter Sellers being Sir Guy Grand. The logistical nightmares were constant. This wasn't a studio-bound picture. They were out on the streets of London, in the parks, on the river, causing chaos. They staged a hunt in the middle of London with hounds and horses chasing a fox? No, that's not absurd enough. They're chasing a human fox. It's just chaos.
Oh no.
They film a sequence in Sotheby's, the poshest auction house in the world, where Sir Guy buys a Rembrandt, cuts the nose out of it with a pair of scissors, and eats it, just to see the reaction. The whole production was a war against common sense, but all this carry-on, was just the warm-up. It was all leading to the grand finale. The pièce de résistance of this multi-million-dollar Hames, the scene involving the eponymous ship, the Magic Christian. This is where the arrogance of the dying 60 seconds, the FU to the establishment, and the sheer vulgar waste of money all come together in a perfect storm of awfulness. The plan for the finale, as per the book, is Sir Guy's ultimate prank. He builds a luxury cruise liner, the Magic Christian, and invites all the richest, most powerful, most respectable people in the world for its maiden voyage. Captains of industry, politicians, aristocrats, bishops, the absolute cream of society, and then he proceeds to systematically destroy their dignity. But the film had to top the book. It had to be a visual spectacular of degradation. So they build this massive, elaborate set. The grand dining hall of the ship. It's packed with all our cameos. Christopher Lee is there, all the high society extras dressed to the nines, and then the entertainment begins. The prank. A speaker announces that there is £10,000 in a vat, a fortune in 1969. The camera pans over. It's not a vat. It's a giant open-top tank, a swimming pool really, filled with, well, in the book, it's pretty clear what it is. In the film, it's a hellish concoction. They filled this massive tank with animal blood, urine and offal procured from a local slaughterhouse. Gallons and gallons of it. The smell on the set, by all accounts, was biblical. It was a physical, staggering stench of death and waste. And then, Sir Guy, Sellers and youngman Ringo start throwing bricks of cash into this soup, this vat of blood and guts. And they watch. And at first, the toffs are disgusted. They're appalled. How vulgar. How positively dreadful. But Sir Guy just keeps smiling, keeps throwing in the money. And then, one fella, a respectable looking man in a tuxedo, his eyes glazed over with greed, jumps in. He dives, head first, into the vat of blood and filth to grab the money. And that's the signal. The dam breaks.
Oh.
Within seconds, the entire ballroom, all these pillars of society, these beautifully dressed men and women are ripping off their diamonds, tearing at their tuxedos, and launching themselves with primal screams into the pool of liquid shite. They are fighting, scratching, biting each in, crawling over each other, their faces smeared with blood and filth, all to get their hands on the free money. Stop the lights. It's an absolute dog's dinner. It's supposed to be the ultimate satire, the big statement of the film. See? They're all animals. Everyone has a price. But here's the kicker. Here's the real joke. To film this, Sellers and McGrath, those had the balls. They just did it. They got a bunch of extras, dressed them up, and said, "Right, there's money in that vat of actual rotting pig's blood. Go get it." It wasn't a metaphor. It was the thing itself. The film company was Sir Guy Grand. The extras were the greedy toffs. They were literally paying people to dive into a vat of filth for money. The film didn't satirize the idea, it became the idea. It was an absolute circus. The level of cynicism is staggering. They spent millions of dollars to prove a point that a drunk in a pub could tell you for free. And as this chaos unfolds, as the entire set is being destroyed by these blood-soaked extras, Sellers and Ringo, they just walk away. They walk through the engine room, past the bridge, where the captain is a gorilla, by the way. Why not? And they just leave. They walk off the ship, down a gangplank, and onto the banks of the Thames. The entire ship was a set, a fake. The ocean was the river, the voyage was a lie. It's the final, cynical punchline. The whole expensive, glamorous, horrifying spectacle was just a sham, a trick played on idiots, and Sellers and Ringo, our heroes, just stroll off into the London smog, laughing. The end. So, the film is finished. A $2.5 million monument to pure Egyptry. The studio, Commonwealth United, finally gets to see what their money bought. Imagine being that executive. Imagine sitting in a dark screening room in Los Angeles, having written check after check for Swinging London, for Peter Sellers' Genius, for a Beatle, for Raquel Welch. And this is what you get. An 8-0-minute long FU note. A film that is actively, aggressively hostile to its own audience. A film that doesn't just bite the hand that feeds it, but chews it off at the elbow and spits it back in its face. It was released in December of 1969, the perfect end to the decade. The Summer of Love was 2 years dead. Altamont was happening as this film was being released. The Manson murders had just happened. The dream was over, and the Magic Christian was the hangover. The critics. The critics were baffled. They didn't know what to make of it. Was it a masterpiece of satire? Was it the worst film ever made? Was it just a mistake?
Big mistake.
Roger Ebert said it was one of the most god-awful, stumbling, stupid, pathetic films he'd ever seen. Others tried to find the art in it, the social commentary. They were all wrong. And the audience? The kids who came to see Ringo? The adults who came to see Peter Sellers? They despised it. They walked out in droves. The film bombed. It bombed spectacularly. It didn't just fail to make its money back, it became a punchline, a warning. So what killed the film? The stars' egos? Get a way out of that. That was just a symptom. Was it the studio's stupidity? Not a bit of it. The studio was a rotten ship, and this film was the iceberg. This film is the why. It's the answer to the question, this is what happened. They had so much freedom, so much money, so much power, they literally had no idea what to do with it. They had no suits to tell them no, the old studio system was dying, and this was the monster that was replacing it. A world where the artists, the geniuses, the head, the balls, with their notions, had the keys to the kingdom. And they didn't just open the doors, they burned the whole kingdom down for a laugh and filmed the ashes. It wasn't a film, it was a product of its time in the worst possible way. It wasn't about the corruption of money, it was the corruption of money. It's not a satire on greed, it's a monument to it. So, was it a grand artistic statement? Get a way out of that. It was a dog's dinner, dressed up in a tuxedo. As me all fella used to say, it's no use painting the pump when the well is dry. And this well was bone dry from the start. It wasn't a film, it was a multi-million-dollar monument to pure Egyptry. The entire industry was away wit to fairies, and this was the bill coming due. They deserved what they got, and that's the dirt from the cutting room floor. The story of a film that proved its own miserable point. Right, I'm off. Slán cha.